In this video, we are going to be going over how to create skin tones using soft pastels. Soft pastels are often referred to as chalk pastels. I do so myself, but there is a little bit of difference. Soft pastels and chalk pastels are slightly different. Chalk pastels are a bit harder. They're very good for kind of doing edges and small details. You can also get them in a pencil format, which is great as well. But before we get into all of that wonderful stuff, we're going to start with how we can actually prepare our paper for a soft pastel drawing. Generally, when we're drawing here in the classroom, we just use our standard cartridge paper. Now, the problem with cartridge paper is it doesn't have enough of a tooth, which is the texture and grip on the surface of the paper that allows it to kind of hold on to the pastel. The added problem that we have is we tend to draw in pencil, and pencil has a bad tendency to not allow the soft pastel to actually stick to it. Because of the shiny surface of the graphite, the pastel just sort of glides over it. So we actually need to recreate our drawing in pastel. To do that, however, there's a bit of a trick. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm using some Faber-Castell, the mini soft pastels. I'm going to start by opening it up and getting one of the pastels. Now, I can use really any color I want. The color might show up a little bit in my final drawing, so I should try to pick something that is in the skin tone range, but should also kind of stand distinct from most of these base skin tone colors so that I can see enough of it to know what I'm doing. So I'm actually going to go with this sort of reddy orange color. Full disclaimer, soft pastels, chalk pastels, pastels of any sort really are not my favorite thing. I don't tend to use them very often, so this is a bit of a learning process for me as well. Always fun. Love to learn new things. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm making something equivalent to carbon paper. Okay? Usually we use carbon paper to help us transfer an image over. But this time we're going to be making a soft pastel paper. It's going to work just like carbon paper. So to do that, we need to cover the entire back of my drawing with pastel. So I'm just going to use the side edge so I can get the widest surface possible. Now that I've covered that surface, and you can see I've really kind of demolished that soft pastel, I want to get rid of the dust. That's one of the reasons that we don't like using soft pastel on this sort of paper, is because it doesn't have enough of a tooth. The dust kind of gets everywhere. So I'm going to shake off this onto the floor. And now I'm going to get the paper that I actually intend on drawing on. Now, sadly, I am out of my pastel papers just now in the classroom, but I have some of this at home. It's really good for using with charcoal and chalk, which is similar to pastels, not the same, so I'm going to be using this. This specific paper. So I'm going to take it open and I'm going to pull a single piece of this paper out. Now, when you're using soft pastels at a higher level, it's good to make sure that you're using a pastel paper, or even better, a velour paper, which really holds on to things right. But for now, this will do. It's not perfect, but it'll do, because it's also used for dusty materials. So I'm going to take my drawing that I've now colored a background on, and I'm going to put it down flat onto my very nice paper. And just like carbon paper, I am going to trace my drawing. So if you've watched the other videos in the skin tone series, wow, that was bad tracing on my part. If you watch the other videos on the skin tone series, you know that I'm using the same image over and over again so that you can see how to create skin tones in three different skin tones in a variety of materials. So I'm using the same image over and over again, which is why I've been using carbon paper very heavily. So this image has been traced multiple times. It's an image of Finn, Rey, and Poe from Star Wars, because we get 3 skin tones here. You can see that the last time I traced this, I forgot to do a portion of his face. I'm not worrying about details with these images. I am just worrying about achieving the skin tones. I'm hoping this image will be large enough to work with soft pastels with. However, I am not 100% sure because, as I've said, soft pastels not my forte. But a lot of things in art are transferable once you understand the basic premise. So I'm just going to hope that I have enough experience with soft pastels and have done enough practice to know that I can hopefully get this right. Okay, now that I've finished tracing my image, we're in the moment of truth, and I'm going to lift off my cartridge paper to hopefully reveal my drawing underneath. Ta-da! Just like carbon paper. Now I have my soft pastel under drawing onto my good quality paper, and that's going to allow me to start drawing in soft pastel to achieve the skin tones for all 3 of these characters. Okay, in this half of the video, I'm going to show how to mix pastels to create the skin tones that we see in this image. For doing this, I've got some Faber-Castell mini soft pastels. I also have 4 random Derwent pastel pencils that were left in the classroom. As you can see, they're mostly in the blue and the black, but I might be able to use them. And then lastly, I also have a Trillion, which is also referred to as a stump, which will help me with my smudging. However, of course, I can use my fingers. So I'm going to get started with this. Fair disclaimer, soft pastel, chalk pastel, any pastel, not really my forte, but we're just going to give it a go because the best way to learn is by just trying. So one of the things that I have discovered when it comes to pastel is that you should always start with the lightest areas first. So I'm going to try to block those in just now. So I'm going to start with the highlight on her forehead and cheek. Now remember that I'm not actually using pastel paper. I'm using paper that is for chalk and charcoal, but it is not pastel paper because I couldn't find my pastel paper. I have, of course, since found my pastel paper since yesterday in recording the first half of this video where I showed how to transfer your image over, but I'm not going to re-transfer it onto the pastel paper, so you're just going to have to bear with me. Okay, so this is going to have a little bit more texture than most pastel paper will have because of the type of paper it is. So I've blocked in some of the brightest shadows. So now I'm going to start bringing in slightly darker shade. Remember, you can always test your shades just in the corner of your page. So I'm going to use that to start to block in slightly darker areas. Now I'm going to do this one a little bit light because I want to add bits of pink and orange in depending on the area of her face, as her face is fairly red from being out in the desert and presumably whatever these characters were doing in the scene that is here in this image. Now remember, I'm not trying to draw the full details of the face. Okay, I'm just working in the skin tone, which is why you won't see me creating eyes or the details of the lips or anything like that as I'm making this video. Now I'm going to use some of that same orange that I used to create the original drawing and sort of blend that in. To get the tones that I want to get within her skin tone, because her skin tone does have a great deal of orange from being out in the desert, I'm guessing. Maybe naturally it does, I don't know, possibly. Generally I find Daisy Ridley looks fairly pale, so. Alright, and I'm going to add just a bit of pink onto her cheeks. You can see that it's quite dark. I really should have tested that. Okay, so I'm gonna have to really lighten that up and be careful with it. Now, I don't want to go much further. I actually want to do sort of the rest of these areas by smudging. Because of the small size of my image, you can see it's smaller than my hand, I'm actually going to do all my smudging with a Trillian instead of doing my smudging with fingers, just so I can have a bit more control. This is just one that I found lying in the classroom. You can see it's got some funky colors on it in a few places. So let's see what happens, because I might end up with some entertaining mixes, possibly. Okay, so I've got some good basic colors, but I haven't gotten the depth of the shadows yet in this image. So I'm gonna have to go back in some of these colors and sort of create a bit more intensity now that I've smudged just a little too much. I think I'm actually gonna go for the next value. It's quite a bit darker, but for those deeper values under her chin and jawline, I think I'm gonna need them to sort of achieve what's going on. So probably need it for a little bit in the details in the ear. Again, I'm not trying to go too far, I'm just trying to get a rough look of what's going on as I'm trying to achieve these skin tones. Around the back of her neck, it's a little bit darker, both from the sun and from the small little hairs that are there. I'm using the flat edge to kind of cover a whole surface area. So again, I'm redeveloping those layers, trying to bring that pink a little bit stronger across her cheek, and I think I actually need to bring it a bit along her chin. Okay, I really need to smooth that transition there. It needs to be not so intense of a change. So I'm going to bring back this sort of light Naples yellow apricot-y color into this area. Using the corner of the pastel to just sort of define that area along the edge. Now I think I actually went too dark by going straight to this apricot, so I'm going to have to bring in some whites. Obviously the white will not be as intense as I'd like it to be because I'm working over top of a color, but that's okay because it does sort of blend, which is one of the things I was hoping it would do. Okay. I guess getting me pretty close. I think the chin jaw is probably the part that I'm having the most trouble achieving what I want to get the blend of colors. I didn't want to use any hatching techniques on the chin because I don't want it to start looking like the texture of a beard. So I just wanted to blend through smudging. Okay, that gives us kind of a rough look at what her skin tone is. It's definitely not complete. But until I would do the details of the features, it won't really be complete. So I do need to keep that in mind. Doing a few small hatching lines along her cheek. And I really don't like how light her ear is, so I'm gonna kind of bring a bit more into that, just to break it up a bit. And I'm gonna risk those hatching lines along her jaw despite my concern of the texture, just to kind of get that effect of the darkness on that part of her face. Okay, that should roughly achieve what I was aiming to get. Alright, I'm going to try the same sort of techniques. I really need to erase that smudge just there. Use the same sort of techniques to do the skin tones of both guys. Okay, my last step on this drawing is to clean it up. You can see I've gotten quite messy. This isn't a final piece or anything for me. This is just me showing you guys a tutorial. So I'm not worried about what the paper looks on the outside, but traditionally if you were going to do something like this, you would have a scrap piece of paper that you would test your colors on, and you know, leave stuff around. You can see that I've gotten a great deal sort of on the newsprint, but also actually on this piece, which is, you know, it's not great, but nothing in the world since it's just a little demo. So I'm using right now a hard eraser, and you can see that it works to an extent, but it's also good to use a kneadable eraser. They're very good on dry materials. They pick up the pigment very well. So I'm just going to use a kneadable eraser a little bit as well, just to clean things up. Give it a shake so any leftover pigment comes off. So what I'm doing here is I'm rolling the kneadable eraser, and you can see it's picking up a great deal of the smudges that I've left on the page, which is helpful. Overall, I don't think I did too badly, seeing as this is my first time using chalk pastel in quite a bit of time. Although I did manage to make Daisy Ridley's face all swollen, like she's got the mumps or something. But you know, I generally got the skin tones where I needed to be, and that was achieved through adding some oranges and pinks into the light skin tone, some greens and yellows into the medium skin tone to get that olive tones, and adding purples into the black skin tone to get some of the light hitting off his cheekbone. So you can see there's not just a various browns you use, you also use a great deal of other colors in the process of making these skin tones.